little brother was born. Not right away. First had come her mother's frantic pushing to bring the baby into the world, while the rest of them paddled. All but Senora Castillo, who sat on the bench next to my mammy, holding her hand and talking her through it. Behind them, the Coast Guard had finished picking up Isabel's grandfather and was headed their way, lights flashing. Their little blue boat was close to the shore. The waves around them were breaking with white caps. Isabel could see people dancing on the beach, but they weren't close enough, weren't going to make it. That's when Mammy's cries had mixed with Amara's yell to, "Swim for it!" And Lewis and Amara hopped over the side, half swimming, half tumbling towards the shore. "No, wait!" Isabel cried. Her mother couldn't swim for the beach, not like this. They had to paddle in, or her mother would never make it to the US. Isabel and Pappy and Senor Castillo rowed as hard as they could, but the Coast Guard ship was faster. It was going to catch them. "Go!" Isabel's mother told her husband between pants. "If you're caught, they'll send you back." "No," Pappy said. "Go," Mammy said again. "If I'm caught, they'll just send me back to Cuba. Go and take Isabel. You can send money like you always planned." "No!" Isabel cried, and amazingly her father agreed. "Never," he insisted. "I need you, Teresa. You and Isabel and little Mariano." Isabel's mother sobbed at the name, and tears sprang to Isabel's eyes too. Like the boat, they had never settled on a name for the baby, not until now. Naming the baby after Lito was the perfect way to remember him, no matter where they were. "But they'll send us back," Mammy sobbed. "Then we'll go back," Pappy said, "but we'll go back together." He put his forehead to his wife's temple and held her hand, taking Senora Castillo's place as Mammy made her last push. The Coast Guard ship bounced in the waves. It was almost on top of them. "It's time," Senor Castillo said. "We have to swim for it now." "No, please," Isabel begged, paddling helplessly against the tide, tears running down her face. They were so close, but Senor Castillo was already helping his wife over the side into the water. They were abandoning ship. Isabel's mother cried out louder than before, but Pappy was with her. He would take care of her. All that mattered now was rowing as hard as Isabel could. She was her mother's last hope. Take Isabel with you," she heard her mother say between pushes. But Isabel wasn't worried. She knew her father wouldn't listen, that he would never leave. Neither of them would, because they were a family. They would be together forever. But then suddenly, arms were picking her up and lifting her over the side. "Say goodbye to Fidel," Senor Castillo said. He was the one Mammy had been talking to, not Pappy. He had come back, and he was the one lifting Isabel out of the boat and into the water. No, Isabel cried. "You saved my life once, Isabel. Now let me save yours," Senor Castillo told her. But Isabel didn't listen. She kicked and she screamed, trying to get free. She didn't want to go to the States if it meant leaving her parents, her family behind. But Senor Castillo was too strong. He tossed her in the water and she sank under the waves in a tangle of arms and legs and bubbles before quickly hitting bottom. Isabel found her footing and pushed herself back out of the water. It was chest deep, and the waves that slid by her toward shore lifted her up and set her down again on the sand. Ivan's cap had come off her head in her splashdown, and she snatched it up before it disappeared into the surf. Then she grabbed the side of the boat to climb back in. Senor Castillo's arm went around her waist and he pulled her away. "No," Isabel cried, "I won't leave them." "Hush, we're not going anywhere," Senor Castillo said. "Help us pull the boat to shore." Isabel looked around, and for the first time she saw that Senora Castillo was there, and Lewis and Amara were there too. They all stood waist deep in the water around the boat. They had come back. They all found somewhere to grab onto the boat and pull, churning up the sand at their feet. Isabel sobbed with relief and grabbed hold. It was harder for her to pull when the waves kept lifting her, but the sight of the Coast Guard boat bearing down on them helped motivate her. So did the cheering. The other refugees on the Coast Guard ship were hopping up and down and clapping and yelling encouragement, just like the crowd on the beach had when they'd left Havana. Isabel saw her grandfather running up and down the ship, waving them toward the shore like a baseball player. urging a home run ball around the foul pole. She laughed in spite of herself. The water now was just below Isabel's waist. They were almost there. The Coast Guard ship cut its engines to run up to them, and that's when Isabel heard her baby brother cry out for the first time. The sound stunned Isabel and the others into stillness. It took her father a moment to cut the umbilical cord with his pocket knife. Then he stood up in the boat with something tiny and brown, staring down at it like he held the world's most incredible treasures in his arms. Isabel gaped. All this time she had known her mother was having a baby. Isabel had seen plenty of babies before. You know, they were cute, but they weren't anything special. But this just wasn't any other baby. This was her brother. She'd never met him before this moment, but she loved him now with a deepness she had never felt before, not even toward Ivan. This was Mariano, her little brother, and she suddenly wanted to do anything and everything she could to protect him. Happy finally looked up from his newborn son. "Help me get Teresa out of the boat," he told the others. The Coast Guard ship was almost alongside the boat now, and the adults scrambled for the other side. Happy bent down over the bow and held out her crying baby brother to Isabel. As if in a dream, Isabel's arms reached up and took him. He was covered with something slimy and gross, and he was screaming like someone had slapped him. But he was the most amazing thing Isabel had ever seen. Little Mariano. Isabel hugged him protectively against the push and pull of the waves. He was so tiny, so light. What if she stumbled? What if she dropped him? How could her father have put something so new, so precious in her arms? But then she understood. Isabel had to carry little Mariano to shore so her father and the others could carry Mama behind them. "Go, Isabel," her father told her, and she went. Isabel held the baby up high to keep him out of the waves that pushed them both to shore, stumbling as the water crashed against the back of her legs, but step by step she staggered up onto the beach, onto United States soil. Isabel turned in the sand, soaking wet and exhausted, to look behind her. Pappy and Amara and the Castillos were on their feet carrying Isabel's mother through the shallow water where the Coast Guard boat couldn't go. The ship had cut its lights and was backing out to sea. On the rear of the boat, among the waving, cheering refugees, was Isabel's grandfather. Isabel held the screaming baby up high for him to see, and Lito fell to his knees, hands clasped to his chest. Then the engines roared, the sea churned, and the Coast Guard ship disappeared out to sea again. The Castillo and Fernandez families helped each other up onto the sandy beach, and their wet feet became dry feet. Senor Castillo fell to his knees and kissed the ground. They had made it to the United States. They had made it to freedom. Still in a dream, Isabel wobbled up the sand toward the flashing lights and thumping music and dancing people. She stepped into the light and the music stopped and everyone turned to stare. Then suddenly, people were running to help her and her family. A tan young woman in a bikini dropped into the sand beside Isabel. "Oh my gosh, Chiquita," she said in Spanish. "Did you just come off a boat? Are you Cuban?" "Yes," Isabel said. She was trembling, but she clung to Mariano like she would never let him go. I'm from Cuba, but my little brother was born here. He's an American, and soon I will be too." Mahmoud, 17 days from home. Hungarian people on both sides of the road stopped and stared as Mahmoud and the rest of the refugees marched down the middle of the highway. Men, women, children, they had all come pouring out of the detention centre after Mahmoud, joined by the UN observers, and the police had done nothing to stop them. The refugees stretched from one side of the northbound lane to the other, blocking cars from passing them. Packs of young Syrian men walked and laughed together. A Palestinian woman pushed a stroller with a sleeping girl in it. An Afghan family sang a song. The refugees wore jeans and sneakers and hoodies tied around their waists and carried what little they still owed in backpacks and trash bags. Mahmoud's father and mother found him and Walid in the crowd. "Mahmoud, what are you doing?" his father cried. "We're walking to Austria," Walid said. Dad showed them the map on his phone. "But it's a 12-hour walk," he said. "Yeah, but we can do it," Mahmoud said. "We've already come this far. We can go just a little further." Mahmoud's mother pulled him into a hug, and then Walid and soon their father had joined them. Refugees streamed around them, and when Mahmoud's mother let them all go, she was smiling and crying at the same time. Cars honked behind the marchers, trying to get past. More cars stopped on the other side of the highway to honk and cheer them on, or boo them. A police van pulled up on the opposite side of the road, and through a loudspeaker, a policeman told everyone in Arabic, "Stop, or you will be arrested." Yeah, but no one stopped. No one was arrested. Mahmoud and his family walked with the crowd for hours, visible, exposed. It was scary but energizing too. They marched quietly, calmly, flashing peace signs at people who cheered them on from the sidelines. Police cars with spinning red lights paced them on the other side of the road, occasionally beeping to warn some car away. News helicopters flew overhead, and a woman from the New York Times worked her way through the crowd, asking Mahmoud questions and interviewing other refugees. See us, Mahmoud thought. Hear us. Help us. 12 hours had seemed like nothing when Mahmoud added up all the time they'd been walking since they'd left Aleppo. But this walk quickly seemed endless. They had no water. They had no food. And Mahmoud's stomach growled and his lips were dry. He felt like one of the zombies from his favourite video game. All he wanted to do was lie down and sleep. But Mahmoud knew they couldn't stop. If they stopped, the Hungarians would arrest them. They had to keep moving forward, always forward, even if it killed them. Later that night, Mahmoud and his family at last reached the border of Austria. There was no fence, there was no wall, no border check, just a blue traffic sign by the side of the road with the words Republic Austria inside the EU circle of gold stars, and above it a sign with the red and white flag of Austria. The Hungarian police cars stopped following them as soon as they stepped across the border, and the refugees paused to hug each other and celebrate their escape. Mahmoud fell to his knees, fighting back tears of exhaustion and happiness. They had made it. They had made it. It wasn't Germany, not yet, but Germany was only a country away. The refugees were still laughing and congratulating each other when the phone Mahmoud's father carried beeped an alarm. So did another phone, and another, until the whole crowd was a chorus of alarms. It was time for the Isha, the last prayer of the day. Mahmoud's dad used an app called Islam to find the exact direction they should face to pray to Mecca. Mahmoud's family found a patch of grass all to themselves, and the hundreds of other refugees did the same, and soon they were all bowing and praying together. It wasn't ideal. They were supposed to wash themselves and pray in a clean place, but it was more important to pray at the right time than in the right place. When Mahmoud finished his prayers and opened his eyes, he saw a small group of Austrians had gathered at the edges of the praying refugees. There were police officers there too, and more cars with more flashing lights. Mahmoud sagged. They only see us when they do something they don't like, he thought again. The refugees had stopped to get down on their knees and pray, and these people watching them didn't do that. They didn't understand. Now the refugees looked foreign again, alien, like they didn't belong. Mahmoud worried what the crowd might do when the Austrians told them that they didn't want them. Their march through Hungary had been peaceful until now. Would this turn into another fight that would see them gassed and handcuffed and thrown into prison again? "Welcome to Austria," one of the Austrians said in a heavily accented Arabic, and others yelled, "Welcome in," and applauded. They actually applauded them. Mahmoud looked around at Walid, who was as stunned as Mahmoud. Was there some mistake? I mean, did these people think that they were something other than Syrian refugees? Suddenly, they were surrounded by Austrians, men, women, and children, all smiling and trying to shake their hands and give them things. A woman gave Mahmoud's mother a handful of clean clothes, and a man worried over his father's cuts and bruises. A boy about Mahmoud's age, wearing a New York Yankees jersey, handed him a plastic shopping bag with bread and cheese and fruit and a bottle of water in it.
Aww.
Mahmoud was so thankful that he almost wept. "Thank you," Mahmoud said in Arabic. "Bit," the boy said, which Mahmoud guessed was German for "you're welcome." The Austrians, they learned, had seen their march on the television and had come to help them. It was like that all the way up the road to Nickelsdorf, the closest Austrian town with a train station. White native-born Austrians and olive-skinned Arab Austrians who had recently immigrated to the country filled the overpasses, throwing bottles of water and food down to them, bread, fresh fruit, bags of chips. A man next to Mahmood caught a whole grilled chicken wrapped in aluminum foil. "We are with you," a woman shouted down to them in Arabic. Mahmood's heart lifted. They weren't invisible anymore. They weren't hidden away in the detention centre. People were finally seeing them, and good people were helping them. At last, Mahmood and his family reached the Nickelsdorf train station, where they bought tickets to Vienna, the capital of Austria. They travelled overnight by train, and when they arrived in Vienna the next morning, they bought tickets to Munich, a large city in Germany. In Munich, the response was the same as in Austria, only bigger. There were thousands of refugees at the train station, and moving among them were hundreds of regular German people offering bottles of water and cups of coffee and cups of tea. One couple had bought a basket full of candy and were handing pieces out to the children. Mahmood and Walid joined the happy mob of kids around them, and each got a couple of candies, which they just wolfed down. A more organised effort was unloading a truck full of fresh fruit, and another group was handing out diapers to anyone with babies.
Aww.
But seeing the diapers reminded Mahmood of Hannah, and he looked up at his mother. He could tell she was thinking of his baby sister too. She put a hand to her mouth, and soon she was working her way through the crowd again, asking anyone and everyone if they had seen her daughter. But no one had seen or heard of a baby plucked from the water. If the people who had rescued her made it to safety, they were likely somewhere here in Germany, surely. Mahmood and his family would just have to keep looking. An official-looking German man with a name tag that said Serhat, which was a Turkish name, approached Mahmood's father with a clipboard in hand. "Are you and your family seeking asylum in Germany?" he asked in perfect Arabic. Mahmood held his breath. Was this it? Was this the end of their long, horrible nightmare near? Could they finally stop moving, stop sleeping, praying in doorways and bus stations? In Germany, Mahmood and his family could make new lives for themselves. Mahmood could finally find a way to reconnect with Walid. They could find Hannah, get his dad laughing and joking again, find peace for his mum. After coming so far, after losing so much, it felt like Mahmood and his family were almost to the promised land. All they had to do was make room in their hearts for Germany, the way it had made room for them, and accept this new strange place as their home. "Yes," Mahmood's father said, a slow smile growing on his face. 1,000 times yes. Right, Isabel, home. This was the coda to Isabel's song. She stood with a trumpet in hand, a gift from Uncle Guillermo, Lito's brother. She wasn't on a sidewalk in Havana, but in a classroom in Miami. It was her second week of school and the first day of band class, the day they auditioned for their places in the orchestra. Isabel twiddled her fingers on the trumpet's keys. She couldn't believe she was standing here in this classroom less than a month after stumbling onto Miami Beach with her baby brother in her arms. So much had changed so quickly. After her mother and brother had been taken to the hospital and given a clean bill of health, Lito's brother, Guillermo, took them in until they found a little apartment of their own. His apartment was smaller than their house in Cuba and not near the beach, but if Isabel never saw the ocean again, that was fine by her. Little Mariano was at home, getting fat and happy. Along with the other babies, Mammy was paid to watch at the little live-in house daycare she ran. Pappy had gotten a job driving a taxi and was saving up for a car of their own. Senor Castillo planned to go back to school to become an American lawyer, and Senor Castillo was already talking to someone about getting a loan to open a restaurant. Louis got work in a little bodega and Amara in a dress shop. And once Amara became a US citizen, she planned to become a Miami police officer. They were going to be married in the winter. And Isabel, well, Isabel had started the 6th grade. It was hard because she didn't speak English yet, but there were other Cuban kids there, lots more Cuban kids, a few who had come to America by boat like her, but more who had been born here. Cubano-Americanos who still spoke Spanish at home. Isabel had quickly made friends, girls and boys who were warm and welcoming, and she knew she would learn to speak English like her teachers soon enough. She was practicing by watching lots and lots of television. At least, that's what she told her parents she was doing. She would learn, and in the meantime, math and Spanish and art class all still made sense. And so did music. Senor Villanueva and the other students waited for her to play. Isabel had practiced for weeks for this moment. At first she couldn't decide what song to play, but then while watching a baseball game with her father, she had figured it out. Isabel adjusted Ivan's industrial baseball cap on her head, took a deep breath, and began to play the Star-Spangled Banner, the national anthem of the United States. But she didn't play it like she'd heard it at the baseball games on television. She played it like a son cubano, offbeat, with a guejo melody. Isabel played it salsa for Ivan, lost at sea, and for Lito, back in Cuba. She played it salsa for her mother and her father, who had left their homeland, and for a little brother who would never know the streets of Havana and the way that she had. And Isabel played it salsa for herself, so that she would never forget where she came from, who she was. Soon Isabel had everyone in the room clapping along to the beat with her, but as she played, she heard a different rhythm, a beat underneath the one everyone else was clapping to. Her foot tapped in time with a hidden cadence, and she realized with a thrill that she was finally hearing the clave. Lita was wrong. She didn't have to be in Havana to hear it, to feel it. She had brought Cuba with her to Miami. Isabel finished with a flourish, and the teacher and other students cheered. She thought she might cry for happiness, but she bit back her tears. She had done enough crying over Ivan and Lito. The song of her leaving Cuba to find a new home was over. Today, it was time to start a new song. Mahmoud's chapter, Home, Berlin, Germany. A German song Mahmoud had never heard before played on the radio of the van that took him and his family through the streets of Berlin. The capital of Germany was the biggest city he had ever seen, far bigger than Aleppo. It was filled with nightclubs and cafes and shops and monuments and statues and apartments and office buildings. Almost all the signs were in German, but here and there he saw a sign in Arabic advertising a clothing store, or a restaurant, or a market. Buildings lined the sidewalks like 10-story walls of brick and glass, and cars and bicycles and buses and trams rattled and honked and clanged by in the streets. This was Mahmoud's new home. The German government had taken in Mahmoud and his family. For the past 4 weeks, the 4 of them had lived in a school in Munich that had been turned into simple, but clean, housing for refugees. They had stayed there, free to come and go as they pleased, until a host family agreed to let them share their home while Mahmoud's parents got on their feet. A host family here on this street in the capital of the country. The van pulled up to the curb outside a little greenhouse with white shutters. Flowers filled the window boxes like Mahmoud had seen in Austria, and 2 German cars were parked in the driveway. Across the street, in the park, teenagers did tricks on skateboards. Mahmoud's father slid open the side door for them to climb out, and Mahmoud and his mother and brothers grabbed the backpacks filled with the clothes, toiletries, and bedrolls the German relief workers had given them. The relief worker who'd driven them led Mahmoud's mother and father and brother up the steps to the front door of the little house. But Mahmoud stood for a moment on the sidewalk, looking around at the neighborhood. Mahmoud knew from his history class back in Syria that Berlin had all been but destroyed by the end of World War II, reduced to a pile of rubble like Aleppo was now. Would it take another 75 years for Syria to return from the ashes the way Germany had? Would he ever see Aleppo again? Cries of joy and welcome came from the porch, and Mahmoud followed the family up the steps. His mother was being hugged by an elderly German woman, and an elderly German man was shaking hands with his father. The German relief worker had to translate everything everyone said to each other. Mahmoud and his family didn't speak German yet, and the family apparently didn't speak any Arabic. But the German family had at least managed a sign written in Arabic that said, "Welcome home." The man shaking hands with his father turned to Mahmoud and Walid, and what Mahmoud saw surprised him. He was a really old man. He had wrinkly white skin and thin white hair that stuck out a bit on the sides, like he tried to comb it, but it wouldn't stay put. When the relief worker had told them they'd be staying with a German family, Mahmoud had imagined a family like his own, not like his grandparents. His name is Saul Rosenberg, the relief worker translated, and he says, "Welcome to your new home." As Mahmoud shook the old man's hand, he spotted a small, thin, ornate wooden box attached to the frame just outside the front door. Mahmoud recognized the symbol on the box. It was the Star of David, the same symbol on the flag of Israel. Not only was this couple old, they were Jewish. Back in the Middle East, Mahmoud knew Jews and Muslims had been fighting each other for decades. This was a strange new world. Herr Rosenberg's wife broke away from Mahmoud's mother and bent down to say hello. She had white hair like her husband, with big round glasses and a gap-toothed friendly smile. From the pockets of her frock, she withdrew a little stuffed rabbit made of white corduroy and offered it to Walid. His eyes lit up as he took it from her. Frau Rosenberg made it herself. She's a toy designer, the translator explained. The old woman said something directly to Mahmoud. She says she would have made one for you too, the translator said, but she thought you might be too old for stuffed animals. Mahmoud nodded. She can make one for my little sister though when we find her, he told the relief worker. We had to hand her off to another boat to save her when we were drowning in the Mediterranean Sea. It was my fault. I'm the one who told my mother to do it, and now I have to find her and bring her back home. Frau Rosenberg looked questioningly at the relief worker as he translated, and her bright smile faded. Walid ran off to show his mother his new toy, and the old woman led Mahmoud into the hallway just inside the house, where family pictures hung on the wall. I was a refugee once, just like you. What do you think?
It's Joseph.
The old woman said through the interpreter, and I lost my brother. She pointed to an old brown photograph in a picture frame of a mother and father and two children, a boy about Mahmoud's age in glasses and a little girl. The father and son wore suits and ties, and the mother wore a pretty dress with big buttons. That's me, there, the girl. That's my family. We left Germany on a ship in 1939 trying to get to Cuba to escape the Nazis.
It's Ruthie. Yeah, it's Joseph.
I was very little then, and I'm very old now. It is Ruthie, you're right. I don't remember too much about that time, but I do remember my father being very sick, and a cartoon about a cat. I remember that. And a very nice policeman who let me wear his hat. My father was the only one to make it to Cuba, she went on. He lived there for many years, long after the war, but I never saw him again. He died before we could find each other. The rest of us couldn't leave the ship with him, and no other country would take us. So they brought us back to Europe, just in time for the war, just in time to go on the run again. The Nazis, they caught us, and they gave my mother a choice, save me or save my brother. Well, she couldn't choose, how could she? So my brother chose for her. His name was Joseph.
Joseph!
Mahmoud watched as she reached out gently, touched the boy in the photograph. He was about your age, I think. I don't remember much about him, but I do remember he always wanted to be a grown-up. I don't have time for games, he would tell me. I'm a man now. And when those soldiers said one of us could go free and the other would be taken to a concentration camp, Joseph just stood there and said, "Take me." My brother, just a boy, becoming a man at last. They took my mother and my brother away from me that day, and they left me alone there in the woods. I only survived because a kind old French lady took me in. She told the next Nazis who came knocking that I was family. When the war was over and I was old enough, I came back here to Germany to look for my mother and brother. I searched for them a long time, but they had died in the concentration camps, both of them. The woman drew a breath. I only have this picture of them because a cousin kept it, a cousin who was hidden away by a Christian family throughout the war. Here in Germany, I met my husband Sol. He had also survived the Holocaust. We stayed because he had family here, and we made a family of our own. She put her hand to the old yellow picture of her family again. My family died so I could live. Do you understand? They died so all those people could live. All the grandchildren and nieces and nephews they never got to meet. But you'll get to meet them, she told Mahmoud. You're still alive, and so is your little sister somewhere. I know it. You saved her, and together we'll find her, yes? I promise. We'll find her and we'll bring her home. Mahmoud started to cry. Everything's going to be all right now, she whispered. We'll help you. Ruthie, Frau Rosenberg's husband called to her. Mahmoud dragged the sleeve across his wet eyes, and Frau Rosenberg tried to hang the picture back on the wall. Her old hands were too shaky though, and Mahmoud took it from her and hung it back on its nail for her. His gaze lingered on the picture. He was filled with sadness for the boy his age, the boy who had died so Ruthie could live. But Mahmoud was also filled with gratitude. Joseph had died so Ruthie could live. and one day welcomed Mahmood and his family into her house. The old woman gave Mahmood's arm a squeeze and she led him into the living room. Mum and Dad were there, and Waleed and her Rosenberg, and the space was bright and alive and filled with books and pictures of family and the smell of good food. It felt like a home.